If you're an immersive creator with primary practices in 360 virtual tour, panorama photography, 360 or VR 180 videography, and you want to learn the next level of immersive storytelling inside or outside of a VR headset, this video is for you. Photogrammetry, I consider it as the building block of the future of Metaverse. The Metaverse that you cannot tell which is fake CG environment or real reality anymore. In order to harness this kind of power for you, we invited the top photogrammetry expert, Hanson, to teach us how to do photogrammetry professionally for Hollywood-level VFX, for in-VR headset 360 virtual tour, VR experiences, and for augmented reality. Using custom-built camera rig like what you see right here, the 3 SONY mirrorless for interior HDR photogrammetry in a low-light scenario, and the 5 SONY setup for a rapid exterior photogrammetry where you need to race against the sun to get the best result without shadow overcasting issue. Let's jump right in.
Hi, my name is Hanson. I was invited by Hugh to come speak about photogrammetry today. Photogrammetry is kind of a big technical word, but it's actually the next big media form for creative use. And it's something that I became involved with probably 8 or 10 years ago. And about 5 or 6 years ago, it literally changed the path of my career. And this is all I really want to work in today. My original background is in visual effects. I worked on films like The Fifth Element, Day After Tomorrow, a bunch of big tentpole films here in LA, working for all the major studios and facilities. And so my background is that of an environment artist. I don't do character work, I do the worlds that characters live in. And from design to execution of these different worlds. Now I am on faculty at the USC School of Cinematic Arts, leading cinematic VR curriculum. And then I have my own practice on the side called Blueplanet VR. So what I would like to do today is just kind of talk a bit about what makes photogrammetry so special and why it's the next big revolution, I believe, and how you can practice it. It's actually become very accessible compared to where we were, say, even 8 or 10 years ago. So photogrammetry, again, it's a technical term, but really it just means capturing the real world in incredible fidelity and resolution. For me as a visual effects artist, it obviously allowed me to, rather than kind of paint things fictitiously as matte paintings or 3D environments, but actually base it on the real world. So it has obvious implications for extending your practice in visual effects. Above and beyond that, though, there's this whole creative side that is truly untapped. And that's something that I've worked so hard in the last number of years just to refine the acuity of the real world, as I call it, the veracity of reality, right? And but above and beyond that, we can now take reality and begin to manipulate it and warp it and use it for creative ends. And that's something I'm just now beginning on. So it's got immense potential creatively or for practical purposes. Obviously, it's a great tool for mapping and kind of looking at the geospatial world. But again, I think you'll be excited to see what creative potential that it has as we explore this topic. You can also look at photogrammetry as being an extension of virtual tours. Panoramic imagery, which I've been involved with for decades, is essential use technology for that practice. 360 video that I've created a lot of work with as well is fundamental technology for filmmaking and virtual reality. But photogrammetry can extend those practices in new and more powerful ways. So we'll introduce the concept of 3 degrees of freedom and 6 degrees of freedom. 3DOF, as we call it, is something that you would do with panoramic imaging or 360 video. And again, it's a fundamental tool for telling stories or providing, again, spatial tours of locations. It can be very strong, especially with the proper narrative. But when we shift over to 6 degree of freedom by having a full three-dimensional model or capture of your environment, you get a stronger neural kind of compelling sense of presence. And it's this remarkable sense of presence that I think is the most powerful thing about photogrammetry. The first time we took one of our photogrammetric models, brought it into an early Vive headset with Unity, I just had chills down my spine and was, I just felt like, wow, this is a turning point for me in my career. And I still feel that way working with it 6 years later. It's just a fundamentally, terribly exciting and powerful tool to use. So one thing about photogrammetry today, which is rather remarkable, we're at a unique point in time where the technology has been around in different forms for a while, but say 5, 6, maybe 7 years ago, new evolution of algorithm and basically GPU computing and so forth is bringing the heavy computation involved to something that's very accessible. And what that's done is it's opened doors to, again, extending your practice in new ways. The other thing is it's been a grand conjunction of technology as I see it, from GPU coming to the fore, these new algorithms, drone technology, and VR headset tech. And all this kind of coalesces into what can be a very powerful experience for you. The other thing about photogrammetry is it's now become used in AR. You can see plenty of examples on your phone where you can bring in real-world objects into your environment. You can also go to a site like Sketchfab or Nira and see plenty of photogrammetry, very heavy models that are brought in for study. This could be used for education and academic purposes, as an example. And then it could be used to extend your particular skill base in the kind of film and media work that you do. And again, visual effects in my domain, it's been a huge tool. And of course, that now extends into the world of virtual production with LED walls, which is changing the whole face of film production now. And if you work in a real-time package like Unreal, you're familiar with Quixel Megascans, which again is photogrammetry-based assets. And again, that's a whole new kind of palette of materials and models you can work with to create incredibly imaginative worlds. And that, again, feeds in directly to virtual production. So the range of where photogrammetry is affecting different practices is very broad. Okay, so another amazing thing about photogrammetry today, again, speaking of ease of entry into the practice, is that it really just takes something here like a cell phone. You'd be amazed how many people do a remarkable work with your phone. And of course, it's always nice to know if you don't have your professional kit, you can at least capture something on the road wherever you might be with a cell. But if you're serious about the field at all, you'll want to use professional DSLRs. Behind me is a rig, let me turn this way, of 5 cameras, and this is a custom rig that I've developed to help me speed up my captures of particular types of scenes. And this is based on SONY mirrorless A7 series cameras. To be honest, a lot of photogrammetry is handheld and the use of a pole that we'll talk about. Being able to extend that with drones or multi-camera rigs like this only kind of increases the range of what you can produce. Okay, so what we're going to do here is look at a custom rig, an example of a custom rig for photogrammetry. And it's useful to develop your own rig oftentimes for certain circumstances about a particular shoot. This I designed for a shoot in the Gobi Desert at a place called the Megao Caves. These are kind of cavern-like spaces, interior spaces that have a lot of detailed Buddhist artwork. And this was under special permission with the Chinese government. We knew we were under a time constraint. We also knew there would be very little light, and we wanted to work rapidly and also in very high resolution. So for that particular use, I designed a rig with a very tall tripod. This whole rig is compacted down. This will actually go much higher. And with 3 cameras, so we can look at the top of the boom. This is using a Nodal Ninja carbon pole to extend, and I have it much, much lower. I could take this up, 10, 12 feet higher. with the top camera. Now, the thing to note here is that top camera is facing downward, is panned down. And you might notice all three cameras are in portrait mode. And the reason for that is I extend my overlap between the three cameras by placing them in portrait. The top camera, again, is shooting the ground surface. The lower camera is shooting up at the ceiling, which had a lot of artwork in this particular case. And then the center camera, of course, is shooting across the room on the artwork on the opposite wall. And again, in the course, we'll talk more about how the methodology of an interior is done. But again, this was designed to make kind of shorter work of what we had to do. Also, being on a tripod allowed us to shoot an HDR stack for the dim lighting and the high dynamic range of the shooting condition. And on top of that, these all have wireless RF shutters. And then I have a cluster of ganged shutters here. And the reason you might ask, why don't you just shutter all with one, is that I want the authority or the, what should I say, the feedback of hearing each camera separately that it got the proper stack. So this can be basically the control. So I would have this in one hand. And again, this is on a video dolly wheel platform. And so what I would do is take a shot, move it 1 foot, take another shot, and work my way around the perimeter of the room using this shutter. So this gave me a really nice overlap of full ceiling to full floor from one move. So in one revolution of shooting with this rig, I pretty much had the space captured.
What do you mean one revolution?
One revolution around the space, right? So, and again, I'll show diagrams in the course. It'll describe this a bit better. So this, again, I wouldn't necessarily use this in an exterior situation unless it called for it. But anytime I shoot interiors, especially man-made interiors, this will be very useful, especially having a flat floor that I can roll it around on. What I'll show upcoming will be another rig that's handheld with 5 cameras. And that's another way that maybe I could work on uneven ground, maybe more in a natural condition with multiple cameras. Again, I could have shot one camera with this shoot and just simply put it on a pole, as I'll show, down low, looking up, holding it maybe a bit overhead, and again, getting on a pole. But again, having all three at once on a rigid platform support allows me to work very rapidly. So that helped. And even then, this took hours and hours of capture. So, but I was able to get one of the spaces done in under a day, whereas if I shot with one, this would be a 2 or 3 day operation. But that's because, again, I was working extremely carefully to make sure that we had every capture made. Because like I say, as great a camera as Sony is, on occasion, the HDR stacking will skip a frame. So again, that's why I split this out and make every shutter separate from the other, so I hear the 3 shutters being made. If I did them all together, I wouldn't have had that. Okay, well, aside from looking like some kind of strange religious exorcism device, this is actually a 5-camera photogrammetry rig that I came up with, concocted to help me shoot outdoor locations, again, increasing the speed of capture. What I'm doing, again, is shooting in portrait mode, so I get heavier overlap between 3 cameras. This one's sky facing, this one direct, and this one aiming down a bit more to the ground. And then side lateral cameras to give me some oblique angles from the side. And again, typically this would be shot with one camera by hand, and it's perfectly fine, and you would kind of recreate these positions manually. But again, the reason for this is speed of capture. I can move much quicker. Now, as I put this together, I realized the weight of this was a bit formidable. So I put this rather geeky little platform, little belt device with an arm. So it's kind of a very poor man's Steadicam. And, but again, takes the weight onto my hips for this rig. So I can kind of angle it at different angles as I walk and capture. And again, this is placed together with shutters, ganged. In this case, I would probably put all these on a single shutter. I would slave them to a single, and I wouldn't worry about the HDR, because this would be hard for me to do an HDR capture here unless I had Sony A7R4s, where the stack is fast enough and captured a handhold. But these cameras being different types, I would gang it to a single exposure and a single shutter. But again, it's a great method of very quickly being able to scan about an area. So if I go here, I would take a shot, maybe angle down, rotate about, bring up at a higher angle, and rotate. And that way I'd get a nice sweep of different angles, heights, elevations, and bearing angles on the subject. The other one I showed, the 3-camera rig on the tall mast, on the tall pole, again is designed for interiors primarily. This rig I would use more on exteriors, more in natural landscapes when I would want to move a little quicker. Because again, speed, especially outside, outdoors like today on a sunny day, we're racing the movement of the sun as we capture. That's always a big challenge in photogrammetry, is trying to minimize the passage of the sun throughout your capture. Otherwise, you're going to get stair-step shadows, and it'll still solve fine, but you'll get kind of an odd shadow characteristic. So this is a way I can go 5 times quicker and capture it and have less movement of shadow throughout the shoot. So the use of drones in photogrammetry is another, as I mentioned, its technology has come along too. And it's kind of an inseparable for using handheld photography. And the reason for that is we can get the context of a site. So rather than go very small on just say a patch of ground, we can begin to capture a larger sphere of whether it's an urban fabric or a natural landscape. But the drone allows us to get even a more extended range. I do a lot of work with GIS data, which is Geographic Information Systems. It's basically terrain data. And that's another way you can kind of extend it. But again, with fairly inexpensive drones, you can get a very nice way to extend your capture a little bit further. And of course, this is used heavily in the area of mapping, of which there's many photogrammetry-based mapping programs and mission planning software for your drone that you may be familiar with. Other kind of non-mapping packages like RealityCapture have actually added that functionality in. So again, everything is kind of, I guess the point in a lot of this technology is it's all overlapping and converging and giving you just an immense amount of power. So we'll cover these techniques in the course. Okay, so Hugh and I are developing an upcoming course in photogrammetry, and part of this will be for the new user. So what we'll do is we'll talk about easy entry points for the field, both technically and practice-wise. So the tools, again, one reason we're doing this now is that the tools are very accessible compared to how they were years ago. I'm a 3D artist, I have been my whole life. But these days, you don't necessarily need to be a veteran 3D artist to practice this. We will cover some of the open source and more accessible tools. For instance, RealityCapture just was purchased by Epic and is now an easy handshake into Unreal. And the barrier of cost and accessibility has come much further down. So we'll also look at an open source package called Meshroom, which is another easy way to experiment with photogrammetry and kind of understand how to produce it. So in this series, we'll be covering both the application of photogrammetry as well as the practice, and then the shooting methodology, and then the post-production. Okay, well, what I'd like to do next is actually show you some outtakes of Blueplanet VR. This is an application that I developed over the last number of years. I released it on Steam last year during the pandemic, and just about a month ago in May, I released it on the Quest after a lot of optimization and additional development. So what I'm going to do is put the headset on, we'll record this, and you'll be able to see what I'm seeing. So here we are in Blueplanet. So let's start by going into Fallen Roof. And I just touch the sphere and it'll load. And what we see now is I'm in the desert southwest of the US. We're in southern Utah, and we're in a very sensitive region of archaeology and Native American culture. And as I just slowly pan my head around, I'm looking out through the spectacular canyon in what's called Bear's Ears. And as I slowly turn, trying not to make you nauseous, I can see an orientation table. And if we look down, there's a little platform you can stand on. And then you get a basic description of what the site is. But then we have a little bit of additional information. If I touch this map, we can see where Bear's Ears is located in the state of Utah. And if I look at this route icon, I can see a small model, and this is indicative of the area that you can explore in the scene. So here we're standing at this lower end of that little cascade of rocks, and we can climb up to get into the higher reach where we can see some scale figures. So again, giving you a preview of what you can explore. The question mark is what I call the deeper story. And these are generally environmental issues or sensitivity issues and ways that you can help protect these sites and some background information on where you're standing. And then we can go back to information, or we can click our trigger finger and dismiss it. Now that I've dismissed it, I can look at my hand controller and I can see I'm going to use the A and the X button to teleport. And this is just a way for me to kind of move around a little easier. So as I hold down one of these buttons, I get a laser pointer. Where it goes red is not available for my travel, but green is. So I put in these small little markers to help you. So I hold and release, and then I move myself to that marker. And now we're kind of moving our way up, much like if I was climbing up this slope in the real world. So now we're almost under the ceiling. Let's go up to the top. And now we're entering the main site, the fallen roof. These pieces of stone fell apparently within the last 100 years and has revealed this spectacular pattern of weathering up on the ceiling. But these are what are called granaries. These were storage for food for the ancient Puebloan culture about 800 years ago. So this is an archaeological site that with proper permitting you can visit. If I go over here, this is an informational kiosk. It says look overhead for hand pictographs. And I can see here 3 hands, which are rock art of the original inhabitants. But I can look out on the site. Let's move out to the edge here. Go right about there. And I can see these floating glass spheres. And this is another beauty of photogrammetry, is I can get novel points of view that I wouldn't be able to necessarily without a drone. So what I can do is just simply teleport onto that sphere. I'm now kind of standing above it. And it gives me an alternate point of view of the site. And let's go out a little further. And now I've got a lot of air below me, and I can kind of turn and look at the site from an aerial perspective that you could really only get from a drone. And again, that's nothing that I shot from this vantage point. It's just recreating the environment. You can see it in different ways. So again, I'm going to return home, and I'll just show you one more. And let's look at Borobudur. And there's a fair amount of cultural heritage sites shown in Blueplanet. This is one of them. This is the world's largest Buddhist temple in Indonesia. This describes it a bit. We can see where it is on the island of Java. This is the little panel that we're going to explore. And here's a cross-section of this. This describes the actual architecture of the temple and the information. Let's click that off. One thing we can do is highlight text descriptions of each sculpture, and I can understand, maybe get a little bit more insight into what it is I'm looking at here. But I'll leave that on, and I'll traverse down a bit. And then this says entire temple model. I'll click that, and here I have a 3-dimensional model of Borobudur, and we can see where we're standing here in the red region. Okay, I'm going to teleport beyond that. And let's look at that now, not from photogrammetry, but from aerial drone panoramas. So if we touch this sphere, now we're seeing the temple shot from my drone up above and looking in. And we can see sculpted panels is where we just were. And this was actually shot on Chinese New Year, so this was a tremendous amount of visitors on the site. But an amazing location. You can look out and see the volcanoes in the distance of Indonesia. And of course, the summit of the temple is one of the most poetic locations. Let's go there and look at the dawn view. And this is a popular thing to do at the site, and exquisite lighting and exquisite surround. So again, this is a 360 panorama, but this is a good example of 3DOF. This was not possible to capture in photogrammetry at that time, so but a 360 panorama could be. So again, these two can kind of live together in ways to help tell a broader story. So I'll return back home. And I will show you one last one, and that is a hang gliding experience. So let's look at Iceland Canyon. And this was from a specially chartered helicopter flight in Iceland. And now we can, again, kind of see where this is. This is near the famed ice lagoon. And again, there's the model of what we captured aerially. And let me dismiss that. And you can see we're standing on quite a precipice here. And but as I look at this now, I have two new controls, press to aim and press to fly. So if I hold this down, both trigger fingers down, I'm going to run right off of this cliff and launch my flight. So I'm going to press and hold, and I get an icon of the glider. And as I look back now, you can see I'm actually in flight. And as I tilt this icon, I can actually ascend straight up, or I can dive down, or maybe I can fly up the canyon. And this is really just an aid for you to see your orientation, but you don't even really have to look at it. You can just tilt your hand controllers to get the flight dynamic that you're after. So this whole canyon is a complex of different waterfalls and little slot canyons, and you can take your time and explore all this with this interface. So let's go back home. And I could keep taking you through so many of these, but again, this is just an example of what I'm doing with photogrammetry, which is a way to share the feeling present at these remarkable locations. And again, I think the interesting thing about photogrammetry, I'm actually going to take the headset off, is that you'll find ways to integrate it into your own work. And that's the really, I think, powerful and inspiring thing about photogrammetry is just it's the world of what if, is what I always say about VR. And so I hope you'll join me in our upcoming course. All right, well, I'd like to close here by talking about this course that we'll be offering. We're just now putting together, and it's going to cover a myriad of topics. It'll be a few hours in length. It'll cover the application, the use of photogrammetry from 360 filmmaking to VR to visual effects. And then we go into shooting technique, both in interior, exterior, object, materials. And we'll do case studies for each one of those, and we'll do some field work and show you how that all is done. We'll review hardware and software. Software we're going to be using in the course will involve some photogrammetry software such as RealityCapture. We'll also show Meshroom. We'll talk about color grading. We'll talk about HDR tone mapping. We'll use SNS Pro for that. And then we'll also, of course, then go into 3D applications, both at the high level with Maya and at a simple level with Mesh Mixer, and show ways for you to do the work even if you're not a seasoned 3D artist. And then we'll go through the entire post-production process. And then we'll talk about the final models, the assets that you'll get, and how to use those, how to integrate them into your 360 footage, or how to bring them into a real-time engine like Unity or Unreal. And lastly, how to deploy them to a VR headset. And so we'll show you kind of the A to Z, soup to nuts production pipeline all the way through. And again, the focus is to make it broad and to keep it to where, whatever your background is, you'll be able to think about ways to integrate it into your own workflow. So I hope to see you there. Thank you much.